Hello everyone, it's Neo Unrealist. US President Donald Trump tweeted on his personal Twitter account at about 7:30 in the evening on August 22nd, 2018, and expressed for the first time any tangible government action that he might be taking with regard to the situation with South African land expropriation from white-owned farms. His tweet reads as follows: I've asked Secretary of State Pompeo to closely study the South Africa land and farm seizures and expropriations and the large-scale killing of farmers. South African government is now seizing land from white farmers. And note that he tagged Tucker Carlson and Fox News in on his tweet. It's believed that Trump, who is known to watch Fox News on a regular basis, saw a segment that Tucker Carlson did earlier in the week on the plight of white South African farmers with regard to their land being seized, or at least the proposal to seize their land by the South African government, potentially without compensation, if, as what it appears, the Constitution is amended to allow it, which it appears to be a fait accompli at this point. This seems to be a foregone conclusion, as the South African Parliament, they've already started the process of amending the South African Constitution, specifically Section 25, which deals with private property. They want to define the mechanism by which the state can appropriate privately owned land without compensation. And this, the Constitutional Review Committee that was formed by the vote by the Parliament, is expected to report back by a deadline of no later than a week from now, August 30th, 2018. And this is being driven. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with South African politics, but I'll try to keep it really simple. It's being driven by the Marxist EFF party in South Africa's parliament, led by Julius Malema. They are on the rise in South African politics, and they're gaining at the expense of the ruling African National Congress, the ANC. They're actually threatening them politically. So in order to stop the bleeding from the ANC to the EFF, the support, the ANC has been forced to flip-flop on this issue and adopt the radical position of the EFF, who are basically communists and hate white people, to pursue land seizures without compensation. The proposed language is said to amend the text of Section 25 that says that if land is taken away from a property owner, that, quote, compensation must be just and equitable. Now, the just and equitable clause in the Constitution, the apparent amendment to the Constitution, is going to change it so that it means that no compensation will be necessary if the property is taken from white landowners. So they will be amending racism and discrimination into their national constitution, which tends to be the reverse of what tends to happen, where typically a country will have a constitution, and over time, they'll amend it to eliminate racism and discrimination. So this marks a sea change in South African politics and history, as it effectively ends the era of, quote, reconciliation that has existed since the black majority took power in 1994. Now marks the beginning officially of state power being used to oppress an outgroup. Basically, all that's going on, it's an inversion of the apartheid era, where the only difference is now what group is on top and using state power to enforce different standards of law based on race. So now, irrespective, let's take it away from, irrespective of the moral and ethical evil of what I just described, let's just focus on the practical impact of the policy itself. Let's divorce it from the morality and ethics and the the boundaries of the race conversation. In short, this policy will be nothing short of disaster for South Africa. This policy of seizing farms from white property owners and giving it to black people was something that was already tried in recent times by South Africa's neighbor, Zimbabwe. About 18 years ago it started. Zimbabwe is practically a failed state in the aftermath. the former dictator of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, he started seizing 23 million acres of white-owned farmland starting back in the year 2000. Three things resulted from this action. A whole lot of violence, because you see white, black, brown, yellow, whatever color you're taking land from against the owner's will without compensation tends to result in violent resistance. So you had a lot of white farmers and black farm workers killed. Within just a few years, Zimbabwe went from being the breadbasket of Africa, exporting food surpluses, to a collapse of food production by 60%, from $1.4 billion in the year 2000 to below $500 million in 2007. Many of the farms that were seized, they sat fallow or even ruined because the new owners, they weren't much good at farming, or worse, they lost interest in farming altogether and just abandoned the land. Now, you have to understand also, given the endemic corruption in Africa, in an African dictatorship, there's corruption, I'm shocked. But much of the seized land was given to political cronies of the ruling party. Many of them hold multiple farms. They weren't handing out these farms to poor peasants in the villages. The farms were given to the politically connected. Shock. The land seizures, they also ruined the economy because they induced hyperinflation in the Zimbabwe economy. By the summer of 2008, the daily inflation rate was averaging 98%. 98. Let me repeat that. The daily inflation rate was 98%. That sounds bad, but let me tell you how bad it is. It means effectively, if let's say the United States had a 98% daily inflation rate, if I gave you $1 today, tomorrow it'd be worth about 50 cents. In 2 days, that dollar will be worth about a quarter, and in a week, it'd be worth a penny. Spend it quick. A Zimbabwean economist estimated, before I go on with that, you gotta understand, the other thing is, foreign investors, they don't tend to view governments seizing property without compensation positively. You effectively destroy any hope of any foreign investment coming into your country. Yeah, people are going to invest in your country after they just saw you snatch a private property away without compensation. Forget it. By 2009, Zimbabwean economists were estimating that the seizure of the white farmland for no compensation, remember, so it didn't cost the government anything up front, it ended up costing the country over $20 billion. In fact, Zimbabwe, amazingly, had to spend $3 billion on grain imports in that time period because, you can't make this up, they could no longer even feed themselves with their own agricultural output. The policy was a complete and total failure, a disaster. In 1997, Zimbabwe was exporting $14 million a day in trade surplus. By 2008, their annual trade deficit was $1.2 billion. They went from a trade surplus in agriculture to $1 billion deficit in a decade. Many people in those rural areas where the farms are located, they had to survive on foreign food aid. This is the disastrous policy that the government of South Africa is looking to replicate. Notice, I haven't even mentioned anything about the flirtation with genocidal rhetoric going on, especially with the EFF. I mean, you have to hear these people talk. What they're willing to say on camera, it's bad enough. When asked if he supports the killing of whites in South Africa, Julius Malima's answer is usually that he does not call for that, but then he'll add the suffix, yet. Usually after a slight pause for effect.
We are not calling for the slaughtering of white people, at least for now.
Remember, just think about that. I'm not calling for the killing of whites, yet. Yet. The EFF is basically a breakaway faction of the ANC, which, I'll give them this much, at least they're honest about their future policy plans and direction for South Africa. I mean, they'll come right out and tell you, we're going to take from whitey and give it to blacks. The EFF, they're essentially communists. They believe all property should belong to the state. They're communists with a very anti-white focus. The ANC, they're a little different. I mean, but the difference is the ANC is still trying to accomplish the same goals, just on the sly and at a slower pace. They don't go around running around wearing the red shirts and berets that the EFF does, advertising their Marxist agenda. But you have the current. Think about this: the current president and head of the ANC is a guy named Cecil Ramaphosa. This guy was once quoted describing the ANC's 25-year strategy to deal with whites. He said it would be like boiling a frog alive, done by raising the temperature very slowly. Being cold-blooded, the frog does not notice the slow temperature increase, but if the temperature is raised suddenly, the frog will jump out of the water. And his meaning was that the ANC would pass laws and enact policies that transferred land and wealth from whites to blacks slowly until they got it all. Doing it in so slow and incremental a pace that the whites don't notice or feel provoked enough to revolt or fight it. The man who said that is now the sitting president of South Africa. I'm sure the white farmers have nothing to worry about, right? That's all for this New Unrealist. Like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel, whether here on YouTube. Don't forget, hit that notification bell too, or on BitChute if you have an account there. If you want to go the extra mile and support the channel more directly, follow the link to Patreon below. Thanks for watching.